Welcome to another deep dive today. We're going to explore a case that's as strange as it is disturbing. The story of Barbora Skrlová. This woman had this incredible ability to deceive, and her actions left like a trail of confusion and pain. Ready to dive in?
Oh, absolutely. It's a case that really makes you question everything you think you know about identity and trust.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Barbora Skrlová was born in the Czech Republic, and from a young age, she seemed to have a knack for deception. There were all these reports of her trying to pass herself off as younger than she was even as a child.
Yeah, it's interesting that those early behaviors almost foreshadow what would become a recurring pattern in her life.
It's really bizarre. Now, fast forward to 2007. This is where Skrlová's story takes a very dark turn. She becomes entangled in what's known as the Kurim case, a horrific child abuse case that shocked the Czech Republic.
The details of this case are just incredibly disturbing. Two young boys, Ondřej and Jakub, were subjected to just unimaginable cruelty by their mother, Klára Maurová, and her sister, Katerina.
Yeah, it's hard to even fathom the kind of abuse these boys endured. They were physically tormented, deprived of food, and psychologically manipulated to a horrifying degree.
And what makes this case even more bizarre is the involvement of a mysterious group. It's known as the Grail movement. This group had some cult-like characteristics, and it seems to have played a significant role in the events that unfolded.
From what I understand, the Grail movement held some pretty unorthodox beliefs, and they seemed to have a powerful influence over the Maurová sisters.
That's right. They believed in a kind of spiritual accounting system where good deeds could somehow balance out bad deeds. And in their, twisted logic, they saw the abuse of the boys as a form of purification.
It's a chilling example of how distorted beliefs can lead to horrific actions. But where does Skrlová fit into all of this?
Well, here's where it gets really strange. At the time, Skrlová was living with the Maurová sisters under a false identity. She was posing as a 12-year-old girl named Anička, and everyone believed she was an adopted daughter.
Wait, so she was pretending to be a child again?
Exactly. And it wasn't just a casual deception. She had fully embraced the role. She was attending school, interacting with neighbors, and even convincing the authorities that she was a vulnerable child in need of protection.
This woman's ability to deceive it's mind-boggling. But what was her role in the mistreatment of the boys? Was she a victim of the Grail movement's manipulation? Or was she an active participant?
That's the question that haunted investigators and the public alike. Some believe that she was a victim, forced into the situation by the Maurová sisters and the cult's influence. Others suspect that she was more than just a passive bystander, perhaps even enjoying the power she held over the boys.
It's a chilling thought. So let's talk about how the abuse came to light. I understand it involved a baby monitor.
Yes, in a strange twist of fate, a neighbor's baby monitor picked up a signal from the Maurová's house. And what they saw on the monitor was horrifying. It was footage of Ondřej and Jakub bound and being mistreated.
That must have been a shocking and heartbreaking discovery.
It was. The neighbor immediately contacted the authorities, and the police raided the house. That's when they found the boys in a truly horrific state. They were emaciated, covered in wounds, and deeply traumatized. They also found Anička seemingly unharmed and unaware of the abuse happening around her.
But of course, Anička was actually Barbora Skrlová in disguise.
Exactly. And this is where the story takes another unexpected turn. With the Maurová sisters arrested and the boys rescued, Anička was placed in a children's home for her own safety. But she didn't stay there long.
I'm guessing she didn't just run away to join the circus.
No, she vanished without a trace, leaving everyone wondering about her true identity and her role in the horrific events they had just uncovered.
It's like something out of a psychological thriller. And to make things even more complicated, shortly after her disappearance, a letter arrived pleading for leniency for Klára Maurová. The letter claimed that the boys were lying about the mistreatment.
Yeah, that letter, supposedly written by 12-year-old Anička, added another layer of mystery to the case. It planted seeds of doubt and raised questions about what Anička truly knew and what role she might have played in the abuse.
So at this point, you have a horrific child abuse case, a mysterious cult-like group pulling the strings, and a master manipulator posing as a child who has now vanished into thin air. Where do we go from here? What happened next?
Well, the story doesn't end there. Skrlová's disappearance was just the beginning of another chapter in this bizarre and unsettling saga.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Let's delve into that next chapter. What happened after Skrlová disappeared from the children's home?
Well, she resurfaced in a completely unexpected place, Norway.
Norway? What was she doing there? And how did she manage to escape detection after such a high-profile case?
This is where Skrlova's mastery of deception really comes into play. She had once again created a new identity, but this time she wasn't posing as just any child. She was pretending to be a 13-year-old boy named Adam.
A boy. Wow, she really took her transformations to a whole new level.
Well, remember her medical condition, hypopituitarism? It made her appear younger than her age. Well, that certainly helped. But she also went to great lengths to create a convincing disguise, like shaving her head, branding her chest, and even adopting boyish mannerisms. She even managed to enroll in a school under this false identity.
It's incredible and a bit frightening how easily you could slip into these different roles. Did anyone suspect anything was amiss?
There were whispers, of course. People noticed that Adam was unusually quiet and withdrawn, but most just dismissed it as typical teenage behavior. And here's the truly shocking part. She had even convinced someone to pose as her father.
Wait, what? Who was this father figure?
It was the real Adam's father. Somehow, Skrlová had manipulated him into going along with this charade. They had even moved to Norway together to solidify the fabrication.
So how did this elaborate deception finally unravel?
Well, it was a combination of factors. The real Adam's mother, who was separated from his father, grew suspicious after losing contact with her son. She alerted the authorities, and a search for the missing boy began.
So Skrlová had managed to evade the authorities in the Czech Republic, only to land herself right in the middle of another investigation.
It seems irony wasn't on her side. The Norwegian police, acting on tips and sightings, eventually tracked down Adam to the city of Tromsø.
I bet they were in for quite a surprise.
You can say that again. Imagine their shock when they discovered that the missing 13-year-old boy they'd been searching for was actually a 33-year-old woman in disguise.
I can only imagine the look on their faces. So what happened to Skrlová after her true identity was exposed in Norway?
Well, the Norwegian authorities quickly realized they were dealing with more than just a simple case of identity theft. They contacted their counterparts in the Czech Republic, and soon the pieces of the puzzle started falling into place.
I'm guessing her little trip to Norway didn't go as planned?
Not quite. Skrlová was extradited back to the Czech Republic to face charges related to the Kurim case and her various deceptions. And with her mask finally stripped away, the world was left to grapple with the question that had been lingering all along. Who was Barbora Skrlová, and what drove her to commit such elaborate and harmful acts of deception?
This is where we'll pause for now, but we'll dive deeper into the trial, the psychology of Skrlová's actions, and the lasting impact of this case in our next segment.
So the trial of Barbora Skrlová and the Marova sisters was like one of the most sensational and closely watched events in the Czech Republic's history. The entire nation was captivated by this bizarre tale of abuse, manipulation, and identity theft.
Yeah, it's understandable why this case grabbed everyone's attention. It had all the elements of like a true crime thriller, a mysterious cult, horrific proofs, and a master manipulator who could seemingly transform herself into anyone she wanted.
And as the trial unfolded, it became clear that this case would raise uncomfortable questions about the nature of belief, the limits of trust, and the dark potential that can lurk beneath the surface of ordinary lives.
So let's talk about the trial itself. What was the atmosphere like in the courtroom?
Oh, it was tense, emotionally charged. You had the victims, Andrzej and Jakub, struggling to recount the horrors they endured. Their testimonies were heartbreaking, painting a really vivid picture of the physical and psychological torment they suffered at the hands of their own mother and aunt.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine the kind of strength it must have taken for those boys to face their abusers in court and relive those traumatic experiences.
Their courage was truly remarkable. And then you had the defendants, Clara and Katerina Marova, seemingly remorseful yet still clinging to the bizarre justifications provided by the Grail movement's twisted ideology.
It's a reminder of how deeply ingrained beliefs can be, even when those beliefs lead to such horrific consequences.
And then there was Skrlová, the enigmatic figure at the heart of it all. Throughout the trial, she maintained this childlike persona, clutching a teddy bear and appearing detached from the gravity of the charges against her.
It's chilling, isn't it? Almost as if she was trying to convince everyone, including herself, that she was still the innocent child she pretended to be.
Her behavior was certainly perplexing. It raised questions about her mental state, her motivations, and the extent to which she understood the gravity of her actions.
Did she ever offer any explanation for her deceptions, her involvement in the abuse, or her decision to flee to Norway and assume yet another false identity?
She remained largely silent, choosing to let her lawyers speak on her behalf. Her defense strategy seemed to hinge on portraying her as a victim, manipulated by the Maurova sisters and, like, brainwashed by the Grail movement.
So she was playing the victim card yet again. It's a familiar tactic for her. But did the court buy it?
Well, the court was faced with a complex challenge. They had to sift through layers of deception, conflicting testimonies, and the murky influence of the Grail movement to determine the extent of Skrlova's culpability.
It must have been a legal nightmare trying to untangle this web of lies and manipulation. So what was the final verdict?
Despite the complexities of the case, the court ultimately found Skrlova, Klara Maurova, and Katerina Maurova guilty. The 3 cult members who had participated in the abuse at the cottage were also convicted.
Okay, so justice was served. But what were their sentences? Did they receive punishments that fit the severity of their crimes?
This is where the case becomes even more controversial. Despite the horrific nature of the abuse and the calculated manipulation involved, the sentences handed down were surprisingly lenient.
Lenient? Really? After everything those boys went through?
I know, it's hard to believe. The 3 cult members each received 7 years in prison. Klara, the mother of the abused boys, was sentenced to 9 years. Katerina, who orchestrated much of the manipulation, received 10 years. And Skrlova, the master manipulator at the heart of it all, was sentenced to only 5 years.
5 years. That hardly seems like justice, especially when you consider the lifelong trauma those boys will likely carry with them.
The leniency of the sentences sparked outrage and disbelief across the Czech Republic. Many felt that the justice system had failed to adequately address the gravity of the crimes and the lasting impact on the victims.
It's a stark reminder that sometimes, even when the guilty are convicted, the pursuit of true justice can be elusive. But why were the sentences so light? Was there, like, a legal explanation for this?
Well, there were a few factors at play. Proving Skrlova's direct involvement in the physical abuse was challenging. While there was evidence of her psychological manipulation, it was difficult to establish the extent of her role in the physical torment the boys endured.
So her ability to blend in, to create these believable personas, actually worked in her favor in the courtroom.
In a way, yes. The lines between victim and perpetrator were blurred, and the court seemed to struggle to pinpoint her exact level of culpability. Additionally, the Grail movement's influence added another layer of complexity to the case.
How so?
The court recognized that the Maurova sisters, and possibly Skrlova herself, were operating under the influence of a manipulative ideology that distorted their perception of reality. While this didn't excuse their actions, it likely played a role in the court's decision to hand down less severe sentences.
So in a sense, the Grail movement's twisted beliefs created like a legal loophole that allowed the perpetrators to escape harsher punishments.
That's one way to interpret it. And the case raises important questions about how we hold individuals accountable for their actions when those actions are influenced by manipulative groups or ideologies.
It's a disturbing thought, but one that we need to grapple with. So after the trial, what became of Skrlova? Did she disappear back into the shadows, or did she try to rebuild her life?
Well, as you might expect, Skrlova's story doesn't end with a neat and tidy resolution. She served her 5-year sentence, and upon release, she once again vanished from public view. Her current whereabouts are unknown.
I mean, the Skrlova case is a stark reminder that, like, the world can be a very strange place. And sometimes reality is just, it's stranger than fiction. But beyond the shock value, this case really raises some important questions about human behavior and the systems we rely on.
Absolutely. It certainly does. One of the things that fascinates me about this case is how Skrlova managed to manipulate not just individuals, but entire systems like schools, social services, even the legal system. You know, it makes you wonder how can we prevent something like this from happening again?
Yeah, it's a question that has no easy answers. But I think one key takeaway is the importance of critical thinking.
You're absolutely right. We live in a world where information is so readily available, but that also means misinformation and manipulation are like more prevalent than ever. It's crucial to develop those critical thinking skills so we can really discern fact from fiction and protect ourselves from those who might seek to exploit us.
In this case, really highlights how vulnerable children can be to this kind of manipulation. Andrzej and Jakub were failed by the adults who were supposed to protect them. First by their mother and aunt, and then by a system that just didn't recognize the signs of abuse or the true nature of Skrlova's deception.
Yeah, it's a tragic reminder that we need to be vigilant advocates for children and that we must always prioritize their safety and well-being. We need to listen to children, believe them, and take action when we suspect something is wrong. Too often, abuse is hidden in plain sight, and it's up to all of us to be aware of the signs and to speak up when we see something that doesn't seem right.
For sure. Another aspect of this case that I find particularly intriguing is the role of the Grail movement. It's a chilling example of how, manipulative groups can prey on vulnerable individuals and distort their perception of reality.
It's a phenomenon that we see time and time again throughout history. Cults and other manipulative groups, they offer this sense of belonging, purpose, and certainty, which can be especially appealing to people who are feeling lost, isolated, or searching for meaning in their lives.
Right, and once they're drawn in, it can be incredibly difficult to break free from that control.
Exactly. These groups often use a combination of psychological manipulation tactics, including isolation from outside influences, indoctrination with a specific ideology, and the creation of a system of rewards and punishments to maintain control over their members.
And in the case of the Marova sisters, it seems like the Grail movement's beliefs about, spiritual purification played a key role in justifying the abuse of Ondřej and Jakub. It's a horrifying example of how distorted beliefs can be used to rationalize even the most heinous acts.
It is. It's a reminder that critical thinking and skepticism are essential, not just when it comes to evaluating information, but also when it comes to assessing the beliefs and ideologies that we encounter in the world around us. We need to be willing to question authority, challenge assumptions, and think for ourselves, rather than blindly accepting what we're told.
So, what can we learn from the Skrlová case? What are the lasting lessons that we should take away from this deep dive?
I think the most important lesson is that deception can be a powerful tool, wielded by those who seek to exploit and manipulate. We need to be vigilant, question narratives that seem too good to be true, and just be aware of the red flags that signal potential manipulation. We also need to be aware of the vulnerabilities within ourselves and our systems that make us susceptible to this kind of deception.
Right. It's also a reminder that even those who appear harmless, vulnerable, or even childlike can be capable of great harm. We should never underestimate the power of manipulation and the lengths to which some individuals will go to achieve their goals, whatever those goals may be.
And as we've seen in this case, the consequences of such manipulation can be devastating, leaving behind a trail of trauma, broken lives, and just unanswered questions.
The Skrlová case it's a chilling reminder that the world can be a complex and often unsettling place. But it's also a call to action. We need to be critical thinkers, advocates for the vulnerable, and guardians of truth in a world where deception and manipulation are, unfortunately, all too common.
Well said. The Skrlová case is a story that will stay with us, prompting us to question our assumptions, to be more discerning in our judgments, and just to strive for a world where truth and justice prevail.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the strange and disturbing case of Barbora Skrlová. We hope you found it insightful, and we encourage you to continue exploring the complexities of the human mind and the world around us. If you like this episode, please subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into interesting and complex topics. Stay curious and safe out there.